Hello everyone and welcome back to another Behind the Servant Shorts. Today we are covering one of my favorite Fate characters who is underutilized by the story but very fun to use. Yes, we are talking about none other than the Rice Shogun himself, Tawara Touta. Touta is one of those characters in Fate that people in the West somewhat scratch their heads at. He is one of those characters who all of the Japanese servants of Chaldea immediately recognize and revere for his legends. In the West, however, he is obscure at best. His is a legend that is not told very often outside of Japan, and at least out here in the Void Country, finding any resources outside of the internet on Japan is near impossible. So today I want to bring you all the Tawara Touta Monogatari, or the Tale of Tawara Touta. So here's the thing. The Tale of Tawara Touta is a fairy tale based around the real-life exploits of a man named Fujiwara no Hidesato. The immediate issue that we run into with this is that we do not find a connection in the historical record of Hidesato using the name Tawara Touta. Nevertheless, we still have artifacts that supposedly came from the Tale of Tawara Touta that originally belonged to Hidesato, held in various temples such as his sword and a bronze bell, but we'll get into that here in a minute. The life of the real Hidesato was not nearly as adventurous as his legends would have you believe. We do not have a confirmed date of birth or date of death other than his life occurring in the early 900s CE, but we do know that he was the child of a provincial governor in Shimotsuke. It is believed that his mother was a member of the northern Fujiwara clan, but then again, there is also speculation that he was not a member of the Fujiwaras at all, and that he simply took up the name. Much of his life is unknown, but we do know that he had some provincial power and that he joined an anti-government movement with neighboring prefectures. As punishment for his involvement, he and his family were ordered into exile, which he duly ignored. This was because he had a lineage tied to the emperor, and also because no one was actually able to enforce him to do this. When other government officials tried to, he made a castle and evaded punishment once again. He was able to regain his reputation and then some about a decade later during the sieges of Taira no Masakado. Masakado was attempting to expand his territory and conquered 8 prefectures in total before Hidesato got involved. A bounty was placed on his head, and Hidesato raised an army and prepared to wage war against Masakado, with a man named Taira no Sadamori on his side, whose father Masakado had killed. Within 59 days of the bounty being placed, Hidesato killed him and was granted military honors. Honestly, Masakado will likely be a servant in the future, so be on the lookout for that name later. But that is really all that we have on him historically. His legend, however, is something much more impressive, and it goes something like this. One day a great warrior left his home behind to go on a journey. He traveled with 2 swords, a bow larger than himself, and a quiver full of arrows. He had not traveled far from home before he came across a bridge with a massive serpent on it. Troubled as to how he should go about this, he weighed his options. If he crossed the bridge, he risked waking the massive beast, but if he turned around, his journey would have already come to an end. So he bravely walked over the back of the beast and continued on his way. He made it only a few paces from the bridge when he heard a voice behind him. He turned around to find that the massive serpent had vanished, and in its place was a prostrating woman. Some tellings of the story say that it is a man, but for my sake we will say that it is a woman. Regardless of who they wore beautiful silken clothes and had crown-like horns atop their head. Hidesato was stunned for a moment, but realized that this was not an ordinary person. They introduced themselves as the Dragon King of this lake, Lake Biwa. The Dragon King begged Hidesato to slay his mortal enemy, the giant centipede of the mountain. Not too long ago, this creature had discovered the whereabouts of the Dragon King's palace and her family, and every night the centipede would drag off a member. Soon the Dragon King feared that all of her family would be gone and that she herself would be carried off next. She had taken the form of a great serpent on the bridge in hopes of finding a brave soul to assist her, but until now, only he was brave enough to still cross. After hearing this, Hidesato pitied the divine being and agreed to help in any way that he could, and the Dragon King took him to her underwater palace. Despite being underwater, Hidesato could still breathe and his clothes remained dry. Here, the Dragon King hosted a great feast for her guests with lavish seafood and beautiful dancers and musicians. So joyous was the party that they had all but forgotten about the threat that was set to come. That is, until the ground began to shake underneath them. The Dragon King and Hidesato went to see the threat for themselves, and off in the distance they could make out 2 massive balls of fire approaching them. The Dragon King proclaimed that these were the eyes of the beast, and then they saw the legs as well, marching forward and producing a light like torches for each leg striding towards the castle. The beast could wrap around a mountain 7 times and still have length to spare. Undeterred, Hidesato requested the Dragon King bring him his bow and arrow. When she arrived with it, he found that there was only 3 arrows remaining in the quiver. Hidesato knocked one and took aim and fired it, landing squarely in the middle of the beast's head. Unfortunately, it glanced off and the monster continued its approach. He knocked another and attempted again, and once again the result was the same. Now he had but a single arrow remaining. He remembered that centipedes had a natural weakness, saliva, but was unsure if one of this magnitude would still be affected. Despite his doubts, he placed the head of the arrow into his mouth before knocking it, took aim, and fired. This one landed on the beast's head and hit the target's brain. The centipede began to thrash about, causing horrible earthquakes and a storm to kick up, but soon it fell silent and lay upon the water's surface, now dyed a deep vermilion. The court of the Dragon King celebrated greatly at the defeat of the centipede, and an even more exquisite feast was prepared. They celebrated for a full day before Hidesato told them that he had to return home. They begged him not to leave, but he was determined to go back to the surface, so instead they decided to present him with some lavish gifts. While he initially refused, they would not take no for an answer, so he accepted. Members of the court turned into what looked like people to help carry the 5 gifts back home. These included a bronze bell, a bag of rice, a roll of silk, a cooking pot, and another bell. They walked him to his castle where his retainers and servants had been looking for him. They had assumed that the storm had kept him away for the day, but were curious as to what the procession of horned people behind him was all about. At once, they all vanished, leaving behind the gifts. It was found that the bells were just normal bells and were given to the temples nearby to help sound the time, but the other gifts were special. The bag of rice produced an endless supply, and no matter how much you took, it never ran out. The roll of silk was much the same way, in that the product produced was of the best possible quality, and no matter how much was cut, it never grew shorter. The cooking pot made anything put into it delicious and required no fire to cook. Now, without needing to spend money on rice, silk, or kindling for meals, Hidesato became incredibly wealthy. Because of the bag of rice, he gained the nickname Tawara Touta. Touta is one of those characters in Fate whose designs reflect his lore perfectly. He is charismatic, brave, and stares with a smile into the face of tragedy. His anti-demonic trait comes from the association that he has with slaying the giant centipede, known as the umakade, which is a type of yokai. Centipedes in general in Japanese myths are viewed as the opposite of dragons, which are generally considered creatures of reverence and longevity. So the centipede, opposing divinity, only makes sense to make it demonic. I have had the question posed to me as well as to who the girl present in Touta's Final Ascension art is, and that is none other than the Dragon King that he assisted, hence why I opted to say she over he. Touta's story is one that was likely written as a way to commemorate the life of Fujiwara no Hidesato, and whoever the storyteller was, nailed it, because now this tale is more famous than the man himself. But that is it. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Also, if you would like to request a servant for me to cover, let me know about that as well. Subscribe to catch these as they go up, follow my Twitch for significantly less structured content, join the Discord and Twitter as well, but for now, keep your chin up. Peace.